What if you were absolutely convinced that you were smarter than everyone around you? That the normal rules of society didn't apply to you? That you were, in fact, one of those rare human beings destined for greatness? And what if, in that state of mind, you decided to commit the perfect murder? That's exactly where we begin, with one of the greatest novels ever written. Crime and Punishment, published in 1866 by the Russian master Fyodor Dostoyevsky, is not a who did it. We know who did it from the very first pages. The real mystery, the one that grips you by the throat and doesn't let go, is what happens inside the mind of a killer. This book will make you question what guilt actually is. It will make you wonder whether intelligence alone can ever justify cruelty, and it will leave you unsettled in the best possible way, because Dostoyevsky isn't just writing about one tortured man in 19th century St. Petersburg. He is writing about every human being who has ever tried to escape their own conscience. Let's get into it. Our story centers on Rodion Raskolnikov, a young, brilliant, and desperately poor former law student living in St. Petersburg. He's renting a tiny, suffocating room that Dostoyevsky describes almost like a coffin. He hasn't paid rent in months. He barely eats. He's dropped out of university because he can't afford the fees. But here's the thing about Raskolnikov. He doesn't think of himself as simply a poor man down on his luck. He believes he is exceptional. He has been quietly developing a theory, one that he has even written an essay about, which divides humanity into two categories. There are ordinary people, the masses, who exist to follow rules and keep the world turning. And then there are extraordinary people, the Napoleons, the Caesars, who have the right, even the duty, to step beyond conventional morality when their purpose demands it. In Raskolnikov's mind, great men have always had to cross certain lines. They have had to shed blood in service of a higher calling. And Raskolnikov has decided he wants to find out which type of man he is. Living nearby is a woman named Alyona Ivanovna, an elderly pawnbroker. She is sharp, cold, and exploitative, lending money at crushing interest rates to desperate people in the neighborhood. In Raskolnikov's mind, she is a parasite, a louse, someone who feeds off the misery of others and contributes nothing to the world. In his twisted reasoning, killing her would be something close to justice, and the money he'd take from her could fund his education, his future, his eventual contribution to society. He plans the murder with obsessive precision. But when the moment comes, everything goes wrong. He kills the old woman with an axe, but then her half-sister, Lizaveta, a gentle, innocent woman, walks in unexpectedly, and Raskolnikov kills her too. She was not part of the plan. She was completely harmless, and in that second blow, his entire theory begins to collapse. He escapes, barely, in a state of near delirium. He hides the stolen money and goods, takes almost none of it for himself, and returns to his room. And then the punishment begins. Not from the law, not yet, from within. What follows is one of literature's most extraordinary psychological portraits. Raskolnikov falls into a fever. He drifts in and out of consciousness for days. His mind churns with paranoia, self-contempt, and terror. He cannot eat. He cannot think clearly. Every person he encounters seems to him a potential threat, a potential witness. The detective assigned to the case is a man named Porfiry Petrovich, and he is Raskolnikov's perfect foil. Where Raskolnikov is volatile and tormented, Porfiry is calm, almost playful. He knows far more than he lets on, and he conducts his interrogations like a chess player, gentle, indirect, watching every reaction. Porfiry has read Raskolnikov's essay about extraordinary men, and he finds it fascinating. Their conversations are some of the most psychologically tense scenes in all of literature. Porfiry never quite accuses, he circles, and Raskolnikov, for all his supposed genius, cannot help but circle back into his own trap. One of the most important things Dostoyevsky does is surround Raskolnikov with people who reflect different paths and different answers to the question of how to live. There is his devoted sister, Dunya, who is prepared to sacrifice her own happiness by marrying a cold, calculating man named Luzhin simply to have money to support her brother. She is dignified, brave, and loyal, everything her brother should admire, but in his pride often pushes away. There is his friend Razumikhin, cheerful, practical, and warm-hearted. He represents the person Raskolnikov could have been if he had allowed himself ordinary human connection instead of retreating into his own intellectual fortress. And then there is Sonia. Sonia is perhaps the most important character in the entire novel. She is the daughter of a broken-down drunk named Marmeladov, a man Raskolnikov meets in a tavern early in the story. Marmeladov is a man crushed by shame, fully aware of his own ruin, unable to stop. He loves his family and destroys them at the same time. Sonia, his daughter, has been forced into prostitution to keep the family from starving. She is meek, gentle, and deeply religious. She suffers, but unlike Raskolnikov, she does not use her suffering to build a theory. She endures it with humility and faith. Raskolnikov is drawn to Sonia in a way he cannot fully understand at first. She has crossed a moral line just as he has, but for entirely different reasons. And where he is destroying himself with pride and rationalization, she has found something like peace through surrender and compassion.
As weeks pass, Raskolnikov's psychological state deteriorates further. He cannot distance himself from what he did. He visits the crime scene. He nearly confesses to a police officer for no logical reason. He insults people who try to help him, then reaches out in moments of desperate loneliness. He is at war with himself constantly. At one point, he encounters Svidrigailov, a wealthy, morally corrupt man who had once tried to prey on Raskolnikov's sister. Svidrigailov is, in a sense, a darker version of what Raskolnikov's theory leads to. A man who has genuinely freed himself from conventional morality and feels almost nothing. He is charming and frightening. And what Dostoyevsky does with him is brilliant. He shows us that the freedom Raskolnikov fantasized about is not liberation at all. It is emptiness. It is numbness. It is a kind of spiritual death. Meanwhile, Porfiry continues to close the net, not with evidence, but with psychological pressure. He tells Raskolnikov, almost gently, that he knows, that Raskolnikov should come forward himself, that there is still time to choose confession over capture, that it will go better for him, not just legally, but inside. And finally, after everything, after the fever, the paranoia, the failed attempts at justification, Raskolnikov goes to Sonia. He tells her everything. She does not recoil. She does not judge him in the way he feared. Instead, she holds his suffering alongside her own and tells her what she truly believes, that he must confess, that the only way forward, the only way back to himself, is through honesty and suffering accepted willingly. And so he does. He walks to the police station and confesses to the murders. He is convicted and sent to a labor camp in Siberia. Sonia follows him there, a quiet, extraordinary act of devotion. And for a long time, even in prison, Raskolnikov is not truly repentant. He still believes, somewhere deep down, that his mistake was not the theory itself, but his failure of nerve in executing it. He resents the other prisoners. He is cold and withdrawn. But then, something shifts. He falls ill again, and as he recovers, he looks at Sonia, who has given up everything for him, and something in him cracks open. Not dramatically, not in a thunderclap of redemption, quietly, like ice beginning to melt in early spring. The novel ends not with a full resolution, but with a beginning. Raskolnikov has 7 years of his sentence remaining. There is a long road ahead. But for the first time, he is facing that road without armor, without theory, without pride, just a human being, broken and beginning slowly to become whole. You might think that a novel set in 19th century Russia about a student murdering a pawnbroker has little to say to us now. But put the period clothes aside, and you'll find that Crime and Punishment is one of the most contemporary books ever written. We live in a culture that constantly celebrates the idea of the extraordinary individual. We are surrounded by people, in business, in politics, in technology, who sincerely believe that their vision, their intelligence, or their ambition places them above certain rules. We have seen, in very recent memory, powerful figures justify harmful decisions by insisting they were serving a greater good. The Raskolnikov logic, I am exceptional, therefore different rules apply to me, has never gone away. It just wears different clothes in every generation. Dostoyevsky's answer to this is not a legal one. He doesn't simply say that you will be caught and punished. His answer is deeper. He says that the human conscience cannot be permanently overridden, that we are not made to be islands, that cutting yourself off from genuine connection to other human beings, from love, from humility, from the willingness to need others, is its own form of destruction, far more complete than any external punishment. Sonia matters so much in this novel because she represents a kind of wisdom that Raskolnikov's brilliant, overheated mind cannot reach on its own. She has nothing, no money, no status, no power, and yet she is, in a profound sense, the freest person in the book. Because she lives without pretense, she loves without condition, she suffers without self-pity, and in doing so, she models what Dostoyevsky believed was the only real answer to despair: compassion, connection, and the courage to be honestly human. The novel also speaks powerfully to the experience of isolation, the kind that comes not from being physically alone, but from sealing yourself off behind ideas. Many of us know what it is to be surrounded by people and still feel completely cut off. Raskolnikov's suffering, at its core, is the suffering of someone who has mistaken his own mind for the whole world. At its heart, Crime and Punishment asks a question that every generation has to answer for itself. Can a person think their way out of being human? Raskolnikov tries. He builds an intellectual fortress. He arms it with philosophy and theory and the cold comfort of feeling superior. And then one swing of an axe brings it all down, not because the law catches him, but because his own soul refuses to cooperate. Dostoyevsky doesn't offer an easy redemption. He doesn't wrap suffering in a bow. What he offers instead is something more honest, the possibility that even the most broken person, the most isolated mind, the most lost soul can find their way back if they are willing to stop hiding and start feeling. That is the crime. That is the punishment. And if you let this book inside, it will do what only the greatest stories can do. It will hold a mirror up to something you recognize, even if you'd rather not. If you haven't read it yet, make time. And if you have, it might be time to read it again.